to be honest with you, I have more trauma from soldiers, my men that I have lost after the war, right? For other reasons, right? Whether that be that they got too drunk and got on the back of a motorcycle, or they got behind the wheel of a car, or right, because they wouldn't reach out to anyone because they were alpha males, right? And alpha males don't do that, right? We're alpha males and we're not betas and we don't ask for help. And I think that has given me, especially recently, more trauma than some of the stuff that I dealt with overseas, because some of those guys I still talk to, some of these guys that I've been in firefights with, right? Some of these guys that I've been in convoys with that have been hit by IEDs. You know, I still talk to those dudes and they're fine and they're doing well and they're dealing just like the rest of us are dealing. It's the ones that we couldn't reach, the ones that we couldn't get the help that they needed. That's what keeps me awake at night.
It's estimated that roughly 3 million U.S. service members served from 2001 to 2021 in the theater of war, following the 9/11 attack on our nation. Today's conversation will take a personal look at the experiences that my guest had during his service for our country. I am Robert Asensio, and with me I have the honor and pleasure of introducing to you Al Rivera. Formal name, Albert Rivera. Retired Army veteran, retired as a Master Sergeant after roughly 30 years of active duty service.
Correct.
We met recently, about a month ago. And in preparation for a special screening of a documentary that I've had the pleasure of working on for the past year and a half, that is Out of the Fire, Into the Light. It is not released, but you were one of those individuals that we wanted to screen the film with. You said something to me that really struck with me, brother. And that was, as you were watching the film, you were sharing in the experiences, or you had shared the experiences that were being portrayed and being told on the screen. Tell me a little bit more about that, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having a 30-year career in the military, a lot of people think it's like, oh, well, you were at war all the time, or you were whatever. I mean, I had dozens of different assignments. Right from the time I was a private to the time I retired as a Master Sergeant. I was a recruiter. I was in the institutional environment. I was in the operational environment. I had the privilege of serving in Iraq twice, in Africa. And like I told you before, over 30 years, I've been on every continent except for Antarctica in uniform. So yeah, a lot of the things that the guys were going through in the film brought back to my frontal lobe, if you will, a lot of the experiences that I had with my men overseas. So it was absolutely impactful. And like I told you, what I loved most about the film is that it did not focus on the war part. It focused on the after part, the recovery. How are these guys dealing with it? Because I'm at that point in my life right now where I'm dealing with not being in the military anymore, not having that purpose, that community, you know, and struggling, to be quite honest with you.
So recently I had a conversation with Colonel B.J. Tedesco. He was the commanding officer during the period of which we're featuring in this film. He commanded a legendary tank battalion, the 37th Armored Regiment, dating back to 1940s. Creighton Abrams was the one that founded that tank division. And he said to me, you know, while he served in Iraq and through his 30-year of military service, he had some high-ranking positions. He had achieved the desire of his career, right? And then post-deployment, war deployment, his last assignment, he's put in a basement,
right?
And he's got no command. Yes, he's helping the military, but he shared with me honestly that really took a beating on him and his psyche. He lost his identity.
Yeah.
And one last thing is that's a commonality that we share in law enforcement or any career that you spend, 2 decades, 3 decades working in, and then you come to the end of that career, you turn in your equipment, and the next day you're a civilian.
Right.
How are you dealing with your detachment from or transformation from one identity to a new identity?
Like I said, it's been a struggle. To be quite honest with you, you're given all these tools, or at least they say they're giving you all these tools to transition you, right? And then this transition is supposed to happen sort of like a transformation. The full moon comes out, you turn into a werewolf, whatever it is, and it doesn't occur that way. You have to reintegrate with your family again. After being away for so long, you have to reintegrate with society. You have to reintegrate with your hometown. You have to find a purpose. You have to find a community, because all of those things are ripped away from you. And I had similar experiences, right? So I was in the infantry and I worked a lot with special operations. And you go and you do these things for God and country. And then, you ascend, and all of a sudden they tell you, well, we're going to promote you, but we're going to promote you in the institutional environment. So you're going to go teach at the academy. Right.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like what you're saying about this colonel being locked in a basement. It's like, how are you going to take me out of the operational environment and put me in front of students to try to influence these folks in a certain way, and then have me be politically correct and everything else? I struggled at the height of my career. I struggled.
And the irony is that we need that. We need your experience, the field experience, to be, I guess, taught to and shared with the newbies, right? And in the colonel's case, this guy was serving the Pentagon military war operations, right? Global war operations.
Right.
But it's when they remove you, or when you're removed from what you're doing and what you're gaining experience in and what you've been used to, and you go into this whole new environment, which is now post-military service.
Yes.
In your civilian life, right? Brother, you have a lot to offer. So let's not sugarcoat that. You have a ton of freaking experience to offer. It's just finding your place. And I guess that's what, fucks with so many people.
Yes. Yeah, it really does. And what a lot of people don't understand is when you come out of a career in the military and you've had this purpose and you've had this life, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I have a lot to offer the civilian community. And there's a lot of jobs out there, right? And the job market is what it is, right? And there's everything from college, recent college grads to guys like myself who's about to turn 50, right? Looking for a job. And what people don't understand is when they interview you, it's like, well, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you're bringing to the table for our company? Or it's like, I'm not looking for the next job. I'm looking for the next career. I'm looking for something to invest myself into the way that I invested myself from the time I was 17 years old to the time I was 48. Like, that's what I want. I want something that's going to give me a purpose, and a paycheck, not just a paycheck. And I don't know if some of the folks out there are ready for individuals like me to come into their environments, right? And try to reshape the way that they think about things, because we're problem solvers, right? Whether we're military, law enforcement, or whatever, you give us a problem, and an ill-structured problem at that, and we're going to solve it. We're going to bring it to resolution. And
mission driven.
We are. Whether it's your wife bringing you an issue or it's work bringing you an issue, it's like, we're going to resolve this. And there's just some folks out there that are not sort of ready for that, which is what I've experienced as far as trying to find a job.
I guess this issue holds true basically in all parts of your life, right? You go out to a new environment, no one knows you. Nobody really cares. It's the mission of reasserting yourself, finding a new purpose, finding a new objective to focus on, but also finding that community that accepts you. You take a person who maybe is suffering emotionally, has PTSD, has not dealt with their issues, right? Or maybe is dealing with them, but a person who's suffering, struggling, and you add the component of nobody really knows you, you're in a new environment, you have to redirect yourself, find new meaning, purpose in life. That could send people over the edge.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was one part of the film that really struck with me, right? And one of the soldiers was talking about how they were at a get together, right? And the majority civilians, and with his spouse or significant other, and he was 3 drinks ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. And he was like, well, I don't see what the problem is. I'm just having a good time. Right. And everybody was like, man, this guy is really far gone. Like, he's to the moon already. And that is absolutely a situation that I've dealt with, where I've gone someplace and I'm power drinking, for lack of another word, right? Because this
That's a
is
good
a
term. That's a good term.
this is the type of thing that we did in the military, right? We went out, we trained hard, we fought hard, and we came back and we partied even harder. And it was, and I know you've experienced it, and it was just something that I was used to. And then all of a sudden thrown into an environment where that's not looked upon very nicely. It's frowned upon for you to be that power drinker.
Yeah, and I think, let's face it, people fear what they don't know.
Right.
And they really don't know. Like they see you, heavily drinking. They say you may be saying, what is it, inhibitions? Less inhibitions, if you will.
Right.
And they don't understand, that you're just acting normal because you've been experiencing, your normal has been crazy for other people, right?
Right.
So you've been in combat. You've been in an environment where they have been shooting at you, where they've shit been blowing up and people trying to kill you,
Yes.
And you're living with that. And you don't know if you're coming home. Can you give the audience a better perspective, a personal perspective of what that's like and what shapes you to become the person that you are then when you're coming out and you're drinking, you're partying, people need to understand.
And I don't know if it's a perspective of people need to understand or that we as military folks who have been through this kind of thing need to adjust our own perspective and understand the rest of society. I think you're right. I think it's a balance in both of them. I think that you need to curtail your habits to a certain environment surrounded by certain people. Right. And
Place for everything.
there is. And, but you don't always have those boundaries clear to you when you first come out. Right. And you're dealing with all of these things like, yes, being shot at, being blown up, right? IEDs, you're dealing with, to be honest with you, I have more trauma from soldiers, my men that I have lost after the war, right? For other reasons, right? Whether that be that they got too drunk and got on the back of a motorcycle, or they got behind the wheel of a car, or they committed suicide, right? Because they wouldn't reach out to anyone because they were alpha males, right? And alpha males don't do that, right? We're alpha males and we're not betas and we don't ask for help. And I think that has given me, especially recently, more trauma than some of the stuff that I dealt with overseas, because some of those guys I still talk to, some of these guys that I've been in firefights with, right? Some of these guys that I've been in convoys with that have been hit by IEDs. I still talk to those dudes and they're fine and they're doing well and they're dealing just like the rest of us are dealing. It's the ones that we couldn't reach, the ones that we couldn't get the help that they needed. That's what keeps me awake at night.
Yeah, I want to go back into, the uncertainty, the fear that you experienced and how that became day-to-day life. It actually reshaped your thought process and who you are. But before I go there, man, in preparing for a speech that I gave on Veterans Day, I was reading up on statistics, and I often question the data that's put out there because for some, nobody ever gets it right?
Right.
And what it estimates is that nationally in the U.S., roughly 20 veterans a day, it was 17 veterans to be exact, 17 veterans a day were taking their lives to suicide, right? Or some other way of unnatural death, right?
Right. Suicide by cop, if they, decide to do something like that, or drinking themselves to death or whatever.
Do you think that that's a right number? I would think it's higher, man.
I don't think that those polls are correct. It went from 17 to 22. Then someone said, forget what article it was that I read that said that it was up to 27 and then back to 22. I don't think that there's accurate
3 million service members that served
Yes.
during a 20-year span.
Yeah. And not all 3 million of those are going to the VA for PTSD counseling or going to a civilian provider and getting, counseling, or going to a clergyman and getting counseling. Not all of those individuals are doing that. So I don't think that it's documented correctly. And I do agree with you that I think it's a lot more every day.
Yeah, man. And coming back to, look, you tell me if you feel uncomfortable, but for the benefit of the audience, I want them to see, and both those that are struggling, that are like us, and those that have never experienced this, maybe give them a better understanding of when you're facing danger day in and day out, threats of life day in and day out, and you see it, you don't, when you're in combat, it's a different story. And then throughout your service career, little phases of the career, so pockets of your career that these experiences happen, but nevertheless, it's compounded trauma. When you're experiencing compounded trauma, it changes you. And I think we should be really talk about the fact that you don't look at danger the same way as the next person. You face death.
Yes.
I want people to understand what that feels like and what that is like.
I think that when you're training for something like that, and then you're put in the situation where you have to put it to use, right? When you start out, and complacency is a huge thing, right? Especially when you're talking about these longer deployments. It used to be that we would go places and we'd be there 6 months, 8 months. These deployments turned into a year, 18 months. So you're going out, and yes, the pucker factor, as we call it, is super high when you go out on patrol that first time.
Only natural.
Right? Your asshole is like that tight, right? When you're in the truck, and your head's on a swivel. You're looking all over the place. You're hyper aware. And at some point it becomes a routine. You get used to it. You're still hyper aware, but not to the same degree. And there'll be incidences where you have to react. And clearly those are the ones that are in vivid memory, but I think that, no, we don't see danger the same way. There are certain things that'll happen. And, I'm not one of those guys that's jumpy for loud noises or anything like that. I get into a reactionary mode when something like that happens. When someone sees danger, if they're going to hide or something like that, no, I'm going to react is my whole thing. And you do see things a different way. You see things from a different perspective. And I think that, especially for guys who've had a whole career in the military or in law enforcement, you do things as a younger man that when you become older and you go into different phases of your life, like when you get married and you have children and all this kind of stuff, you start to look back on some of those things that you did as a young man and you regret those things. And even though we may not look at danger the same way, we definitely struggle with our moral fiber, because you say, I was 21 years old and I did this. And, maybe when I did it, I was laughing about it. Or maybe when I did it, I was high-fiving other guys when I was doing it. And then now you look back on it and you completely regret those things. And those are the types of things that, after being in the military for a career, haunt you.
I agree with you. We generally are more affected by those we lose after the service, right? And you to go back and you go, damn, they had their whole life ahead of them, or that's just unnecessary. A permanent solution to a temporary problem, right?
Exactly.
But for that person that's going through the struggle and that sees no other way out, it's hard to get to them. And how do we love your thoughts on what's the remedy? How do we get to people who are hurting, bro?
Man, I would love to say that it's about awareness, and it
define awareness, please, because
we have all of these things now. We have social media, we have direct media when it comes to mailings and, hey, we're checking up on you. And I've experienced that in the last couple of years, just being retired, is that the VA sends you a lot of stuff. Right. And certainly, there's an app for the VA. You can log in online and you can do all these things. Right at the top, it says Veterans Crisis Line, right?
Which is 988, the national line.
Correct. And there's local veteran crisis lines. There's ones for Florida and everything else. So, awareness, it's kind of hard to talk about awareness when you have to be that person who is willing to say that you need help. And I think that it's very difficult for guys like us to do that. Just like it was super difficult for any of those guys in the film. I mean, you could see the way that they were talking about how they struggled with that. And I dealt with that, to where you'll have everyone around you telling you that you need help and you're not listening to them, right? Because you have to come to that decision on your own. You have to pick up that phone, or you have to walk in to a clinic, or you have to do that on your own. And it's super hard. When I say alpha male, I'm not talking about whatever their career in the military was, special forces, infantry, whatever. If you joined the military and you went to boot camp and you deployed somewhere or did something for the Army, you're an alpha male in my book.
Or female.
Right. Or female. Right. So, you have alpha and beta females too. So it's very hard. I think there's a lot of pride involved in saying, hey, I'm this person, right? I'm this soldier, or I'm this NCO, or I'm this officer, or whatever. And I need help with me now, right? Especially after being a senior leader and you're taking care of so many other people, right? I always had either a platoon or a company or something, right? A detachment that I needed to take care of. Their needs came before mine. And then now I see that I don't have that anymore. But because I'm in this rut, I'm not taking care of what's most important to me, which is my family, right?
One of the things that I recently come to terms with, my parents' generation, Latinos, and I don't think it's just isolated to Latinos, but my parents' generation were all about, don't make me look bad.
Exactly.
Spanish. Si la gente de nosotros, no me haga pasar pena, right? Don't embarrass me.
Right.
Does that hold true with why we don't seek help? Because we're concerned about what others are going to say about us.
Does it influence us? Absolutely, it influences us. There's no way that it can't if you grew up in that sort of an environment with that sort of a father figure.
But even without the parents, you think we still have, is that a factor in why a lot of people don't seek help?
I think it's absolutely a generational thing, right? So I think that there are a lot more. We were introduced to the information era in tidbits, right? It's like I try to tell my son, I'm like, look, we had a house phone and that was it, right? And then beepers came along. And when beepers came along, it was drug dealers and doctors. Those are the two people that have beepers, right? And then cell phones came along.
Miami, yeah.
Right. That was it. Right. If you were in Miami, it was drug dealers and doctors. And so all these little bits of information, and then cell phones were only to make phone calls. You couldn't take pictures or send pictures. And the flip phones, right? I thought I was a huge Star Trek fan, so I was like, I need one of those flip phones. I want a communicator, And now you have all this information at your fingertips. You have a computer that's connected to the entire world in your hand. And I think that this newer generation gets bombarded with a lot of information, sure. But I think that they're also more aware of these things. Like, hey, if you have a crisis, ask for help. It's not just a class that they're getting. It's not just that after sex education in health class, they're going to talk to you about depression, and then you have a test at the end of the week and that's it. You're going to stop talking about depression. I think there's a lot more awareness for the younger generation. And I think there's a lot more encouragement from parents now to say, hey, man, if you're not feeling well, talk to me, right? Like my dad never did the, hand on the shoulder thing with me, where I'm doing that with my sons. And I think that there's a lot more, we're just different. We're different when it comes to raising our kids than our parents were with raising us. Doing things like this, like us sitting across from each other, just having a conversation about it. Certainly if a military veteran, law enforcement veteran like yourself, and, a career military guy like myself can come out here and say, hey, man, I went and I looked for help. It was absolutely necessary for me. No, it wasn't, and for a lot of different reasons. You're talking about the parents thing, and don't think that didn't cross my mind. It's like my dad would have never done this. My dad was a prisoner in a Cuban prison for 5 years, and he didn't say pip about it. When he came to the United States, he got a job and he raised his kids, and you think about those kind of things. There's been situations that I've been in the military where SEER school, for instance, I had the opportunity to go to SEER school and I was there for 3 weeks. That was it. Right. And then I'm thinking about my dad, in a Cuban prison for 5 years. I'm like, man, if I could do 3 weeks here, if my dad did 5 years in a Cuban prison, and it's one of those things where it's like, no, I don't necessarily want to put a blindfold over my son's eyes and say, the world is not shit, because the world is shit. Right. Parts of it, at least. Right. So there are parts of the world that are shit and you're going to have to deal with it. And I'm not raising a boy. I'm raising a man. Right. But I also don't think it needs to be as harsh as the way that our parents brought us up. Right. Or the way our fathers treated us. So I think there needs to be a little bit more awareness, a little bit more understanding. When something happens and they need help, we don't need to be that guy saying, no me haga pasar pena. Right. It's fine. Hey, you need help. You need to go see your school counselor. You need to go talk to somebody else. It's not me. Fine, man. I was in the same situation, and share that with them. I think that it's probably, I don't know, like to circle back to your question. I don't know how we help more folks other than doing stuff like what we're doing right now.
Oh, do you have one defining period that maybe you brought it all home to you and said you need help? Or is there one, or is it just a culmination of experiences and you're getting older?
I think it was a culmination of that, experiences, getting older. It's certainly compounding. When you talk about substances, right? When you talk about alcohol in particular, you don't start out self-medicating, right? You start out drinking at social events and you start out over drinking at social events and all that kind of stuff. And then you get to the point where it's like you're not seeking help, but you're self-medicating with alcohol and you're doing all this kind of stuff. And so I think it was progressive. Have there been one or two hairy situations that my mind definitely goes back to? More so than any of the other ones? Yeah, absolutely. But I think that when my career came to a grinding halt, and what I mean by that is I decided to retire, right? I think that's when I really blew up. In the year that I had gotten out of the military, my intent was that first year to reintegrate with my family, to start being a father and a husband again, and to start doing right by everybody, to try to get into community and everything else. And it just fell apart on me. It absolutely did.
How are you doing now?
I'm doing great now. And the reason that I'm doing great is because I checked myself into the VA and I did a 3-month rehab, residential rehab treatment program there at the VA hospital. And it was not an easy decision to make. I would love to say that it was courage. I think that it absolutely needed to happen for me, for my family, for all of our well-being. It absolutely needed to happen. I look back upon it as like I should have made the decision a lot sooner. I shouldn't have waited a year. But it's like we were talking about earlier. You have to come to that decision on your own. Everyone else could tell you, man, you need help. Man, you need to go. You need to do rehab, and you need more than a week. You need this and that and the other thing. And, I'm not here to tell anyone what kind of combination is going to work for them. Everything works differently for everybody. So, but are there a ton of resources out there for guys like us? Absolutely. And not just with the VA. I mean, you got Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. You have a whole bunch of organizations out there. I had always belonged to the American Legion, as soon as I could become a member. And I've, belonged to the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. And, I believe that professionals should belong to professional organizations. So I was a member of all of these organizations, right? Never went to any meetings. I just paid my dues every year, got the membership card in the mail, and that was it. And it's like, okay, I'm a member of such and such. I started to get involved with the American Legion here in Coral Gables Post 98 through a friend of mine, J.C. Gomez, who's a lieutenant colonel in the reserves right now. And he's like, hey, man, why don't you run for, our vice commander, and we can do great things here and, at Post 98. And I said, all right. So that was, and I was going through all my stuff during that time, but that was what provided sense of community for me, especially with other veterans, that I could discuss a whole bunch of things that I wouldn't discuss with other people. Right. So, and, Post 98 does great things for the community. It does great things for our youth. It does great things for veterans. So I'm all about doing that. And, I'm lucky. If it hadn't been for Post 98, we would have never met. Right. So, and it's a fantastic organization. I love that it opens up their membership to all veterans. So, it's not like the VFW where it's like you have to have been a overseas combat veteran, right? So we got everything from Vietnam era vets to Cold War era vets to there's a great mix there. There's a great mix of history there. With our membership, which provides great conversation and great camaraderie and fellowship. It's a fantastic organization to be a part of, and it's the one that I've decided to dedicate my time to. If you have a DD-214 and you have an honorable discharge, and even if you don't have an honorable discharge, I mean, we may not be able to make you a member, but we'll find you the resources to help you out. Absolutely.
Don Slesnick, former mayor.
Fantastic guy.
Colonel. When we were at the museum, Coral Museum, about a month ago, Don, that was my command.
Yeah.
The commander when I came off active duty, and I went to the 370 or 78 Civil Affairs unit, which was an incredible unit. Then I went over to the SF group.
Yeah.
Man, so you have good people there.
Yeah.
Very good people. Look, for anyone out there struggling, there are resources for it. Please drop us a line, dial 988, call the American Legion. Post near you. There are brothers and sisters that want to help you. We may not be able to solve all your problems, but you know what? Many of us have walked the walk, and if we haven't walked the walk that you're walking, we'll find somebody that has to be able to give you help. It's very important. Life is worth living. You served the country. You served our community. Now let us help you. On that note, I want to thank Albert Rivera, my colleague today here on the show, the Miami's Community News team, Anzoni Savala, and I think we have a new producer back, Priscilla Cordova, the producer on scene. Thank you to the Millers, Michael Grant Miller, Miami's Community News team, but more importantly, you, the audience. We can't thank you enough. You can find us on all major podcast platforms, Spotify, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, www.betsandbadges.com site, or the Miami's Community News at communitynewspapers.com.